Hello, and welcome to the Argyle HR Leadership Forum, The Future of Work. My name is Nick with Argyle, and it's great to have everyone joining us today. A couple of notes before I turn things over to our panel moderator. To ask questions throughout this session, simply type into the Q&A chat, and we will address your questions at the end of the session. Also, be sure to subscribe to Argyle on YouTube for exclusive access to all our past events. Now, without further delay, I would like to introduce our moderator, Janine Pajot, Vice President, Human Resources, Bayer Canada. We're super excited to have Janine and all our panelists for a panel discussion titled Creating Authentic Engagement and Well-Being in the Modern Workplace. Welcome, Janine. Over to you.
Thank you, Nick. And hello, everyone, and welcome. As Nick mentioned, my name is Janine Pajot. I'm a business and HR executive and fearless leadership and culture expert and coach. So it is a pleasure to be here today with these amazing powerhouse women talking about, authentic engagement, well-being in the modern workplace. And this is a topic that definitely needs to be front and center for all of us. So I am your moderator for today and really looking forward to the conversation we're about to have. So I will be turning it over to my colleagues and fellow panelists here in order and have them do a self-introduction. But while they do that, ladies, if you wouldn't mind, as you're introducing yourself, can you also please share some of your own experiences as they relate to what are the biggest challenges organizations are facing when trying to create authentic engagement and well-being. So, Stacy, I think we're going to start with you, please.
Thank you, Janine, and my fellow panelists. I'm so honored to be here with you today. I'm Stacy Lewis, the CEO, founder, and chief disruptor of HR Interrupted. HR Interrupted is a full-service consultancy firm, and where we curate people leaders who are unapologetic about and have grit to challenge the status quo of old school workplace ideologies and principles. And so I am honored to be here. And I love starting with this question. And Janine, I'm gonna make mine very simple. The biggest challenge that I've seen in doing this work with organizations is them not successfully defining the why. Why is it important for you to have authentic engagement in your workplace and well-being? And oftentimes organizations engage in it because it's the next best sexy thing, or it's just the right thing to do. But really unpacking the why, and in part of that why, not creating a us versus them mentality, meaning from the CEO to the line staff, all of those individuals are employees in the workplace. The CEO needs to be in a place that's authentic, where they have well-being, all the way down to the line staff. And I think sometimes that us versus them is created, right? And so then people say, well, if that's what the employees want. No, everybody's employee wants that in the organization. So really do a good job in identifying the why for the organization.
Thank you, Stacy. I love that why, and I'm sure we're going to get into more detail about that throughout the session. Tamara, can I throw it over to you for your introduction and your thoughts on the same question? Oh, Tamara, are you on mute? We can't hear you.
Oh, there I am. Hi, everyone. I'm Tamara Safe. I'm the National Managing Director of People Development and Insights at Gallagher, which is an insurance risk and consulting firm. I lead a consulting practice focused on bridging workforce and leadership challenges with data-informed solutions. So our work spans everything from research to advanced analytics, benchmarking, strategic consulting, and really focus on partnering with organizations to elevate engagement, well-being, and performance. Before getting into this particular role last year, I was in various internal HR leadership roles. So I was a practitioner. I was leading the full HR function and the DEIB functions and part of executive teams leading companies. So, I approached this work and this conversation from both a consulting experience where I have some data and research that I think about, but also very specifically from a practitioner experience. And that's how I really think about, approaching data. It's not just about the numbers, it's about the stories and the people behind the data. So Super thrilled to be here. And as I think about that challenge, the question about the challenge, I think about it in terms of I love the why and understanding the why. So, Stacy, thank you for that. I think about it in terms of employee listening as well. So a lot of organizations say they want this to build this authentic workplace, and they implement specific tools and strategies to build this workplace, and they say that they're listening, and perhaps they do listen. They use all the tools to listen, whether it's engagement surveys or onboarding surveys. They have focus groups with folks just to understand what's going on and how employees are experiencing the workplace. But then they fail to actually act on anything that they hear. And I don't think it's not fully intentional. I believe it's because they don't actually know what to do with the data and the information that they collect. And that just erodes trust. So that's to me, that's a huge challenge when building an authentic workplace. If you start on that journey, it can't just be a check the box exercise. You really have to see it as a catalyst for change that you want in your organization.
I love that. Thank you, Tamara. Actions do speak louder than words, right? Wonderful. So Taisha, over to you, please.
Hello, everyone. Hi, my name is Taisha Men, and I work for Humana. I'm a diversity, equity, and inclusion lead with a focus on inclusive hiring and talent mobility. And I love this question since I work in healthcare. I think that one of the biggest challenges is that there's a gap between leadership intent and day-to-day behaviors. So I think that a company may preach work-life balance, but its leaders are celebrating long hours, constant availability, prioritizing deadlines. They're looking at behaviors that are frowned upon. Your associates are looking at those behaviors, and they quickly learn the real message, right? They know exactly, is it a culture of wellness? What is this culture like? And I think that we need to make sure that our leaders are actually reflecting and living a culture of wellness. And I think that's the biggest challenge, that we can tout it all day. We can preach wellness, but are we living it? Because your associates will know very quickly what the culture is like and if wellness is prioritized or not.
Indeed, living it every day. Those are excellent words to start us off with. And Monica, over to you, please.
Yeah. Hi, I'm Monica Panetta. I'm the Chief People Officer at Pareto Health, based out of Philadelphia. And my esteemed panel here said the same exact thing I was going to say. So I'm going to change it up a little bit. I do actually think the role modeling is super important, as everyone has said here. You can say whatever you want to say about a wellness culture and well-being, but if you're not modeling as a leader yourself, it doesn't really mean anything. So I'll take that one step further and just say, making sure that you're kind of denoting between burnout culture and well-being culture, because I think those two things fight constantly. Like, everybody wants to have the well-being culture, but the work sort of, forces you to maybe live in the burnout world instead. So I think that's a pretty big challenge all of us have to face.
Thank you, Monica. That's interesting. The well-being versus the burnout culture. I'd like to be able to get back to that maybe a little bit later. Why don't we move on to some of our questions that we have here, and definitely make time for that topic. So, Tamara, I'll have you kick us off here. When it comes to balancing business performance goals with initiatives to support that work-life integration, and to Monica's point, preventing burnout, what are your thoughts? How can leaders engage and be a part of the solution?
So I've thought about this question, Janine, and there's not really an easy answer, but let me try to answer it. I think the first step really is for leaders to prioritize the work-life integration and actually be able to recognize burnout. So I really love, what Taisha and Monica said as well in terms of role modeling. So that's certainly part of it. But recognizing burnout is key. It's not just a productivity issue, it's a human issue. And so managers, leaders need to understand that there are human beings behind productivity. And it really starts with understanding where employees are in terms of burnout, on the burnout spectrum, and inviting their ideas for support. I don't believe managers and leaders can do this on their own. So, it goes kind of back to the statement I made about employee listening. So you're listening to your employees, invite them to help you with the solution and help you balance, how you make sure that your business is performing the way that you need it to perform, as well as keep clear that work-life integration is important and making sure that burnout is not prominent. Our research shows that 24%, only 24% of organizations offer mental health training for managers, just as an understanding. And yet those that do are better equipped to support employees. So the best leaders should ask themselves, how can I help? And then act on what they hear. And if they can't fully support those employees, their employees, they need to be transparent about what they can and cannot do. So I think there's a hint of transparency that has to happen when you're trying to balance business performance and work-life integration as well.
Janine, can I jump in on that? I absolutely love where we are with this. I think one foundational point to talk about when all of this is really defining what work is. Work is a relationship. And when we see work as a relationship, then to Monica's point about, and to Taisha's point about the modeling, it looks different. And right? Work is a relationship. When you are in a natural relationship, what's important to, I'll use myself, I've been married for 33 years. What's important to my husband is important to me. And so we do things, right? We have joint conversations. When we have created conversations, we consider both sides. But for so long, the narrative about work has been us versus them, managers and employee. So it innately builds this culture of modeling behavior. But if we take a step back, that's why I started with the why. And we recognize from the CEO to the front line, we are all in this relationship together, then a modeling behavior, and I love Taisha saying that, won't be needed, because we know that that person too needs to have their well-being taken care of. I like to lay that foundationally because I think it aligns for the course of the conversation for the people participating.
Yeah, good point, Stacey. I would love to take it back to Monica, just to maybe expand on your intro related to well-being versus burnout, just so that you can expand on that in light of the question we have on hand.
Yeah. I mean, I think that there's this idea of, understanding, to Stacey's point, like that relationship foundationally. I think with the way that the work world has kind of turned over the last couple of years, who works from home, who works in the office, like, where does it begin and end? Like, there's not really a good definition of that anymore. People can get a hold of you any time of the day, any time of the night, any day of the week. So there's some sort of like personal responsibility that you have to take with that. And I think people need guidance on it. I think I've seen a lot of people come into the workforce from, college and not understanding, if you don't do that early, like, it's a very hard skill to learn. So having people that can help teach it and train, and to Tamara's point, like, all of those things, someone needs to show you how to do that, and make sure you say it's okay to do that too. So, it's not going to affect your performance if you're not working 14 hours a day. Like, there's not like a stopwatch, like going off at a certain time of the day, 11 p.m. or anything like that, so somebody's got to guide you in that way. But I think Stacey's point's like setting the relationship, that's where it starts.
Love it. Thank you so much. Okay, Taisha, over to you. What ways can new or existing programs be personalized to meet the diverse needs of multi-generational and multicultural workforces? What have been your experiences?
I love this question. Yeah, I think that for me, you said it in the question, right? Personalization, it's key, because we can't rely on one universal program, right? We just can't. What I have learned from my experience is that wellness doesn't look the same for everyone. Culture, generation, and lived experience all shape what people consider well-being, right? So Stacy keeps on saying, what's the why? Like, how do we define it, right? So like what that means and how we define wellness it's different for everyone. So for some cultures, it's okay to openly talk about mental health. And for others, there's a stigma around it. Some employees might embrace meditation or mindfulness, while others prefer faith-based community, physical activity as a form of wellness, caregiver support, even financial coaching, right? And so it's really important that we're mindful of all of those. And it's best to create, I would say, like a menu of options, right? And make sure that it's accessible. So you have a la carte menu of all these different things, touching generations, touching, your multicultural workforce. Because like I said, wellness is something that is culturally defined, and you can't take this one size fits all approach. So I think that's really important. So everyone keeps on saying, like, listen to your employees, listen to your associates. I think it's through that listening you can then understand, what is wellness? How are my associates defining wellness across generations, across this multicultural workforce that I have? And I think that that is really key, because it is defined differently by everyone and for everyone.
It's so interesting. We just had this conversation not long ago when we were doing benefit re-enrollment and looking at our offerings, and that was the very piece that someone came forward is well-being means something different to everyone. So thank you for your thoughts on that. Yeah, anyone else wanted to jump in on this? This was a great topic.
I could talk. I could talk for it. Taisha, that's the home run. That's the grand slam right there. And the way for organizations to understand about it is not a one size fits all. And I'm going to stay in this place. That's why when we change the narrative about the way we think about work, from it being transactional to it being a relationship, then you can embrace that wellness, right, is culturally defined. But if we take work from a transactional, you do this for me and you get something, you lose that spirit. And building on what Monica's saying about working 14 hours, those days are gone, right? Or I'm gonna say that as you're building that relationship, right? There was a time I've been in HR for 40 years. When work, you were just come to work, you don't talk about culture, you don't talk about wellness, you get a paycheck and you be quiet. That's not here anymore, right? And so how do we deprogram some of the leaders, right? To know once you matter too, because nobody ever told you that you mattered, right? That's not anybody else's fault coming in an organization. So Taisha hit the grand slam with saying we got to understand it's not a one size fit all. And even if you don't understand it, that's okay if you don't understand it. You still have to acknowledge it and respect whatever that output is. I love that. That's the grand slam. Yay.
One more thing, when you were saying that, like, what matters, right? And when you think about what matters, and when you think about creating that relationship, if you think about your associates coming to the table, and it's a reciprocal relationship, right? I think about, what are we talking about here? And we're really talking about inclusion, right? When you're talking about a relationship, you want to feel seen, you want to be heard, you want your needs to be met. And let's bring it back to the business. We know that high levels of inclusion, right, really sustain high levels of engagement. And how do you have that high level engagement? How are you hitting those business outcomes? That's through making sure that the needs of your associates, whether those are wellness needs, whether it's paying for my class pass every month, right, or my fitness app, or making sure I have caregiver support, right? We know that we have some folks that are, caring for little ones at home and caring for, adult parents, right? Like, how are you meeting those needs? And I think that's really important, because when you meet those needs, you will see those business outcomes later, right? You will have that high level of engagement. You have that high retention, right? We talked about all of the different things that were happening in the pandemic, right? Like, quiet quitting or quiet ghosting and all of these things. Well, how do you get folks to want to stay? It's by meeting them in the middle, like Stacy said, and finding that middle ground in that relationship.
Love it. So let's stay on that topic about inclusivity. So Monica, as an HR leader, how are we ensuring inclusivity when planning well-being programs, et cetera, within the organization?
I really think that this comes back to making sure that you're including your employees in the planning and in, asking them what they want. We recently just launched our first ERG at Pareto, and it's really centered around values as a whole, but then we have different categories of focus within the ERG. So different areas of, simple things like office activities that we want to plan, or volunteer activities that we want to give back to the community too. So it's not sort of like me and my team sitting up high going, this is what we're doing. It's everyone's input and feedback. And, that sort of shows an imprint of the whole company. We've got people from all across the business, all different locations. So really getting them involved in what they want and what they need and asking them that, I think, is a really good first step, as of anything in HR, right? Like, it's always asking the employees. I also think making sure that you've got a good way of communicating. Like, this is a common struggle. We've got email, we've got Teams, we've got text, we've got like all these different platforms, right? And some people read email, some people don't. They're in the field all day. They like Teams. So trying to understand how you communicate that out. Is there a landing page that you've given people to go show them the resources? How do they give their input? I think that's really important, because you can't then launch a program and go, oh, everyone will see this, in an email, because they won't. So I think that's something people don't usually think about, but it is something to make sure you're thinking through as you launch and communicate.
That's a good point. That layers into what we were talking about with personalization, right? Everyone learns, absorbs differently. So wonderful. Stacy, did you want to make a comment? I thought maybe I might have cut you off there.
Oh, no, I'm not going to speak on every comment. I love this, but I won't know. I
just want to make sure I'm doing my job right. Okay, perfect. Why don't we move on? Because you did touch about ERGs here. Anyone with some examples, and congratulations, Monica, on your first ERG. It's tremendous. Anyone here with further thoughts about how ERGs continue to play that role of sustainability with well-being initiatives? Who would like to take the floor on that?
I'll jump in a little bit. Again, Monica, congratulations. That is on your first ERG.
That's amazing.
There's a lot of conversation, and I'm going to balance the statement on the ERGs and the NRGs. I definitely, as from a position of inclusivity, I think they're important, right? One of the things that we've been talking about a lot is hearing from the employees, and that is at the forefront. And though I'm going to inspire organizations to make sure we balance that message, because sometimes we hear from the employees and there are some things that the employees are going to ask for that we cannot do. Okay. Mm-hmm. And so if we don't, right, let me say we cannot do, because we can do most things. It may not be prudent at this time. And so I'm going to use from ERG's perspectives. You have individuals who come forward, and this is an experience, I'm speaking from a true experience, when I used to work at one of the largest ports in the country, and we had a group that wanted to bring forth an ERG. The value system of the ERG was probably would not align with the organization. Okay, so now we have to talk about that, because if you're saying an inclusive workplace and an ERG is to support my what my value is. So we have ERGs representing the Latino community, African American community, caregivers, parents, veterans. I mean, we had a number of. The mistake that was made in this instance was that there was not a foundation about the ERGs. Right? It was just in a time where we were representing inclusivity in the organization. It was coming right after the murder of George Floyd. And so we as an organization, we exploded. And what we did not do was define that. So when this entity came forward and said, our voices are not being heard, it was challenging, because to Taisha's point, there's some personalization around it. But in the personalization, we got to make sure that we are not causing intentional harm. So and I'd love for my panel members to kind of balance that with it, to talk to them about it. So definitely play a role. There's the new, the networks and the professionals and all of those things. But I also want to tell organizations, make sure you're having honest conversations. You have your bylaws of what ERG, like you lay the foundation. Mm-hmm. I think that's key. Lay the foundations of the purpose of the ERGs, what support the organizations are going to give, what their output should be. I think that's important, because culture is what's allowed. We make this hope. That's all culture is what's allowed. And so I would love to hear about that, because people ask me all the time. And I think Tamara said that, like, Stacey, I'm still trying to find out, you know, the strength of ERGs, because you said that you've seen some failures. And I wanted to talk about the failures as we talk about the successes, but it caused, to be honest with you, a lot of challenges within our organization at that time, because this group that wanted to establish ERG felt that we were, I'm gonna just be honest, not inclusive, because their purpose may not have aligned with what the organization defined as you know, inclusive. I hope I'm saying that, but I think that'll be a great conversation for on the floor.
For sure.
I was going to say, I agree with you there. And the first thing we did with ours is laid the charter, because I've seen a lot of failures too. So we've said, look, people asked us for this for a long time, and I kind of resisted because I knew we weren't ready. We didn't have people that could kind of take the reins on it and understand, like, this takes work. You know, this isn't just something that the HR team kind of leads and puts on. Like, this is work on you guys, right? Like, so I totally agree with you. And I think there's a balance of being able to say, we're taking your feedback, but we can't always do everything that you're bringing forward. Like, I'm in that situation right now a little bit and it just started, you know, so it's going to be a challenge. And I agree wholeheartedly on the charter and the outcomes and defining what the company support is, for sure.
Yeah, you can't boil the ocean,
right?
Certainly, and there's lots to do. That's why it's not intended to be a sprint, for sure. Why don't we move on here? Let's talk about how managers and leaders play a role in all of this. So, what sort of leadership behaviors have you observed or promote within the organization to ensure that our leaders are being inclusive, that they're supporting well-being initiatives? And I think I will ask Tamara to comment on that one.
Thanks, Janine. I'm going to back up just a little bit, because we're talking a lot about inclusivity, and I believe that's only part of the equation, and that really belonging is the goal. And, you know, just because you invite someone to the party doesn't mean they feel like they actually belong. They can dance, they can be themselves. And so we need to be able to design well-being strategies that go beyond representation and ensuring that everyone feels seen, heard, valued, but also like they belong within that culture. And that means embedding inclusivity at every touch point, from onboarding to recognition to even the benefits that an organization provides. So I just wanted to kind of set the stage with that. Leaders, managers, they're multipliers. And we've talked about modeling, right, from leaders that's necessary. And their behavior really is contagious. And partnering with the managers means we need to equip them with empathy, with curiosity, and awareness of their own biases. So, you know, it's particularly around biases. Practical steps include training on how to give meaningful feedback, mental health support, training, navigating difficult conversations. The example that I have here is in one of my roles leading a DEIB function. I created a workshop on power and privilege for managers and team leads in the company. I was really nervous to conduct the workshop, quite frankly, because it can be a very polarizing topic, especially when folks are really looking inward and understanding power and privilege. And when people hear those two words, sometimes it can just it can set them off, quite frankly. Like, well, I don't have power and I don't, you know. So I took them through an exercise where folks really identified their power privilege areas, and it helped them identify some of the biases as well as that they have. So the self-awareness part, I think, is incredibly key. It is a key behavior that managers need to have. They need to understand who they are, and that means understanding their biases. That means understanding what it means to be inclusive, what it means to be able to talk to your employee in an authentic and transparent way and connect together, coming up with a solution together. What does well-being mean for that particular employee? Because like we've said throughout this conversation, well-being may mean something different, completely different from one employee to another, from one generation to another. So a manager has to be equipped with that self-awareness. I think that's really the number one behavior that I'd put out there. But empathy and curiosity, those are other behaviors that they have to have. They need to be curious, even if they don't. Stacy, how did you put it about understanding? Even if you don't understand, you have to acknowledge it. You have to acknowledge how an employee might perceive what's happening and how they're experiencing the workplace.
Yeah. And curiosity enables self-awareness.
Yes, absolutely.
Anyone else to comment here? I move on. All right. I am going to just do a quick check-in with Nick. Do we have any questions online at the moment?
Yes, we do. We have a bunch of audience questions.
Okay.
And here's a good one. How do you bridge the generational gap within a company? The older generations seem to have a great work ethic, while the younger generations need a little more push. Now, that's not my opinion. That's what this person is saying. So, what do you think about that?
Taisha, do you want to kick us off with that?
That's why I was looking at
Such
Taisha.
a good question. That's such a good question. And I'm here pondering it. And, we do work in a multi-generation, right? And I think that to Stacey's point, when she was saying that we've created kind of like a us versus them. And I think that, maybe not specific, making sure that your teams are blended, right? And making sure that when you're looking at mentors and peer coaches, and when you look at reverse mentoring, that you're putting those generations together, right? That I'm sitting down with a Gen Zer, which I am a proud millennial, right? Or I'm sitting with a Gen Xer or a boomer, right? Or we're working together, because I think that there is so much to learn, right? I focus so much on lived experience, right? And how that informs your work. So we can both be SMEs in one area, but your lived experience and my lived experience may be completely different. And how we approach the work, how we approach, like how we get it done is so differently, that I would love to understand your approach, right? I would love to understand how, you approach the work, how you show up to work every day, and how that informs how, you show up, right? So I think that I'm not sure if I'm answering the that you want me to, but I think that it's through communication, it's through putting people together, it's through having conversation and really just building upon that, because we have so much to learn from each other, but we're creating all these little silos. And what we'll find, I think that there's more that we have in common, that we have that separates us, that we have more than what divides us. And so when we're looking at those generations, you might be like, you know what, I did the same exact thing, but let me show you how I worked through that, right? Or let me tell you how I approached it. I've been blessed with so many mentors that have made me who I am today, who have shaped the way that I look at the world, the way that I informed, like how I approach my work, that I think that it's so important, right? As everyone is on there, constantly evolving and changing in the workplace, I think it's so important to put folks together and have those conversations. And I think that synergy will naturally change the way that folks are working and the way that they show up.
Wonderful. Thank you. Nick, back to you. You said that there were quite a few questions. I want to make sure that we reach out to our audience as much as possible. What else do you have?
Great. Yeah, here's another one. How can HR teams balance organizational goals with individual employee needs when designing well-being initiatives?
Oh, wonderful. Monica, maybe you can kick us off.
Yeah, no problem. I think this one, again, it goes back to listening, goes back to getting ideas. I mean, we do a survey twice a year with our employee population. Any area or opportunity you have to get feedback and listen in, I think that's really important. One thing we also do is we hold a manager forum every month. So we have our people leaders all together on one call, and we talk about things, challenges they're having, if they need resources, any type of, question they might have, if it's about benefits or anything, to give them a peer group to talk to, but also to give us a forum to try and help them, train them, and give them resources. So those are just, concrete things that we've put in place that have really helped.
Wonderful. Thank you. Anyone else can add? No? Okay, we're going to take one more question, Nick, out from the audience before we come back to
Janine, actually, I saw one in the audience, in the backstage about the burnout one. Can I take that one, Nick, about burnout as a common challenge today?
Sure. Let me read the full question. Sounds
Yeah.
great. Burnout is such a common challenge today. What are some realistic strategies leaders can use to help employees find better work-life integration?
Thank you, Janine. That one really stood out to me because of a couple things. One, the word realistic. And I think Taisha and Tamara and Monica, we've all said that today. I'm going to just this one is just very simple. Yet we have to model the behavior, meaning going back to the question that Taisha answered about the individual saying the generation had a strong work ethic and the new generation needs a little push. To Tamara's point, that might be a bias, right? Right? There were days where people worked 14 hours and that's just what you did. And new era people leaders are now coming in and saying we're not going to work that amount of time. So realistic strategies are recognizing that whether, I gotta say it again, if you're the CEO or you are still an employee. So when I coach my individuals, I tend to not let my people use titles. You are an employee that sits in a leadership role. Now, that changes how we look at things because now you're not this person that doesn't need to manage work-life integration. I'm going to tell the story very quick. My CEO at my company, this was my previous company, this was important. And I told him, when my son is on the baseball field, I will not respond. That's important. I'm not going to respond because you have me all the other times. 3 times my son was on the baseball field. My CEO called me. I did not pick up the phone, Taisha. Next day, he called me to his office and said, I tried to call you. I said, I know, but I shared with you, when Kyle is on the baseball field, I'm not going to pick up the phone. Happened 3 times now. Finally, one day he called me. He said, does your son have a baseball game today? I said, yes. He said, okay, where? And he came to the game. From that moment on, my CEO came to, when he wanted to decompress, he said, does Kyle have a game? I'll meet you there. I modeled the behavior. And what I didn't do was I did not back down, right? I did, because the minute I picked up that phone, then my boundaries didn't matter. So in answering the question, I'm saying, Monica, it's okay to say, hey, I give you 100 and whatever percent, but in this realm, I have to own that. And I love that story. And it got so much so that his secretary will call me and say, is so-and-so with you? He kind of needs to take this call. I know he's in his down moment, but he needs to take the call. Model the behavior, stand by it, and know that you matter too. That's how I want to answer that. That's a realistic strategy. Don't talk about it, be about it, do it, model the behavior. It absolutely works.
That's amazing, Stacey. Can I ask a follow-on question? Maybe your advice for those who might feel a bit reticent or nervous about taking a position with their boundaries. How can they, graduate to, hey, don't call me while my son is on the field?
Because, and I definitely want to hear from, again, because we have to change how we think about work. When work is a relationship, then I can tell Taisha, who's my lead, hey, a relationship. But if it's transactional, then it feels like I have to do this, so she does that. I know I hope I don't feel like I'm preaching, but this is at my heart. This is at my heart. Culture is what's allowed. So when we call work a relationship, I've been married to my husband 33 years. What's important to me is important to him. He know I like diamonds. He can't bring home carnations, right? We talk about it. And so we built this feeling in the work that, oh my God, I can't say anything because I'm not going to get a promotion. I'm not going to get a job. Why? Why do we need to do that? You have key individual contributors. You have people like Taisha who's creating impactful programs. You have people like Tamara who are doing excellent work in the HR space. You have people like Monica in the workplace who are doing these benefits. You got the resources there. Trust the relationship. Trust the relationship. That's why people don't do it.
Oh my God.
That sounds a little preachy. I'm sorry, but I'm passionate about that. I'm sorry.
Preach.
Appreciate that sermon, Stacy.
Absolutely, absolutely. Okay. In the time we have left, this is a bit of a round robin, and Tamara, I'm going to start
Love
with
it.
you. If there's one thing you would like the members joining us today to take away on this topic, what would it be?
You know, I'm going to say something that organizations treat well-being as a perk, or maybe it's a program. It's not fully embedded into the organization, into the ethos of their being and their spirit and their culture. This is actually a leadership competency. So maybe we need to think about it a little differently. If we evaluated our leaders, not on just business results, but on how well they support employee well-being and engagement, imagine what the workplace might be like then. Imagine how leaders would then approach well-being, their employees, understanding their biases, becoming more curious and empathetic. Because if they don't have bonuses and they don't have promotions that are tied, it's gonna fundamentally shift their priorities. So I would say, think about this as a leadership competency, and what would that mean for your organization?
Gorgeous. I wrote that one down for sure. Monica, you're next.
Yeah,
Same question.
I love that too. That's hard to follow, for sure. But I would say, I mean, it's everyone's responsibility, right? Like there's a lot of discussion about well-being and managers, well-being and leaders, but it's everyone's responsibility. And I think it goes back to values too. Getting everyone on common ground. I know we talked a little bit about generational differences, but if you can get everybody in a common, you know, what does everybody want? Everyone wants the business to be successful. Everyone wants, you know, the same things. They want people that are living their values every day. Like bring it back to the center. I think that's an important piece.
Wonderful. Thank you. Stacy, over to you. And
Taisha, go to Taisha. I run my mouth enough.
everybody's going to be
Thank you,
talking.
Stacy. I appreciate it. As I sit here, I'm thinking about two things, right? And I want to approach it from two ways. I think that one, you have to approach wellness and your wellness programs not as like a program, actually, not as an event or a perk, but think about it as an operating principle, right? One that's embedded in every aspect of the employee experience, right? And if it through all the stages, how are we embedding wellness into that? I think that it'll change the way that you think about it. Another thing that, going back to Stacy's comment when she was so eloquently just speaking about, work as a relationship and all of those things, psychological safety and creating those boundaries. And you can look at wellness as having psychological safety, because so much of that stress and burnout comes from the fact that people don't feel like they have the ability to speak up, the ability to take the time. So I think that creating psychological safety is really important in setting boundaries. And just one little tidbit that I want to give for the folks that are just like, how do I do this on a day-to-day basis, right? How do I start to create those boundaries and take time for myself? I can tell you message when I'm away from work, say I'm going to be gone just for a day or two, I will leave someone's name, or I can say, you can reach out on everybody on my team, but in the spirit of care, I will respond to you once I get back, because I don't want someone chasing down my colleagues, asking, questions that they may not know. And they're like, well, let me look through Ty's stuff, or, let me look online to try to answer this question, right? So I try to care for my colleagues as well by saying, hey, you know what? I'll be away from the office until Monday. And if on your questions, I'll be here to answer them when you get back. And I think that just doing some of those small things, I've had great leaders that I've been able to say, hey, I'm not going to download Team on my computer between 9 and 5 or 9 and 6, but I'm not going to do that because I'm going to be so close to just looking at that message at 7:30. So I'm not going to put that on my phone, right? And a third little tip for those that are like, okay, well, how do I start to do this is if you're sending email messages, so for instance, I may go pick up my kids from school and then I have a 2-hour break, I might jump online. If I'm going to send an email at 8 p.m., I will email falls outside of normal work hours, feel free to respond during your work hours, right? So I'm allowing people, I'm giving them the space to respond at 9 a.m. or at 10 a.m. when they're back online, and that they don't feel that they have to respond at 10 p.m. because I'm sending email at 10 p.m. You know, like I took a 2-hour break earlier the day. So just think about some of those things. If you're like, okay, well, I don't know how to ask, or I don't know how to start, small things like that may be a starting point for you to start to create boundaries and have conversations around wellness and having that psychological safety.
Those are all great takeaways, Stacy.
And now I'll jump in. Taisha, she was in my mind. Oh my gosh. Taisha, I want to just share, my closing would be exactly what Taisha says. And on my outgoing message, it says, as an advocate of life work integration, I honor and respect boundaries around personal time, well-being, caretaking, and rest. Should you receive correspondence from me during a time that you are engaging in any of the above, please protect your time, space, and respond when you are re-engaged. Prioritize life when and where you can. You are worth it. I have that. That's the outgoing message that I have, just so people can and she's right. It's just those small things.
Yeah. I think that is the perfect way to wrap things up for today. Oh my goodness, ladies, it has been an absolute honor to be part of this panel with all of you and to hear the amazing work that you do and the guidance that you've given all of us today. So at this time, thank you so much. And Nick, I am throwing it back over to you.
Great. And thank you all. This really was a fantastic discussion. And I want to thank everyone else for joining us today. This session, along with all of today's content, will be available on demand following the event. Our next session will begin at 12:25 p.m. Eastern Time, which will be a keynote presentation titled Attracting Excellence, Talent and Acquisition and Retention Strategies in Action. Please click on the join button that will appear on your screen to be redirected to the next session, and we look forward to seeing you there.